Thank you very much, Dr. Chomsky, for welcoming us here in your office at MIT. It's really a privilege for us to be here. For the European, and as well for the European people, for the young people, they will be very, very happy to know what you mean about all these subjects that we will speak about. And as well, you know that you are very welcome in Barcelona anytime. I am sure you will meet a lot of friends there. There is a lot of friends. I know that you have a lot of friends. El Premi City to City Barcelona FAT Award obre el debat sobre la transformació de les ciutats des d'un àmbit pluridisciplinar. És a dir, busca aquelles respostes transformadores de la ciutat amb un clar benefici per la ciutadania. Professor Chomsky, creu que la manera com estan creixent les ciutats arreu del món afavoreix la qualitat de vida dels seus ciutadans?
Well, I suspect there's going to be a substantial change in that respect. For one thing, as I'm sure you know, the United Nations came out with a study a few years ago of slums. There's the inner city, which is a lively, vibrant city, and as soon as you move beyond the city, it's not actually a wall, but kind of like a fence. There's miles and miles of the most miserable, unimaginable slums that you've ever seen anywhere in the world. And they're getting larger and larger because people are coming in from the countryside, but they can't survive. They can't get into the city because they don't have the education, the talents, the opportunities aren't there, and so on. So they congregate in urban slums. Sometimes they're inside the city. You can go not too far from here and see pretty awful slums. Another problem is that the kind of, in the advanced, particularly in countries like the United States, maybe the US is the most extreme example, the suburbanization of the last 50 years, which was very self-conscious state corporate policy, is completely unviable. I mean, it just can't survive. It's ecologically untenable. Its use of energy is untenable. It simply can't survive. Transportation, energy use. Everyone has to have 2 cars. Also, it has very little of a sense of community. People are very separated from one another. First of all, they don't live near each other, and even if they do, they don't know each other because that's not the way these communities work. And that's a major issue, not everywhere, but dramatic in the United States, where there was very conscious social policy to expand the use of cars, fuel, and so on and so forth, and it has led to the breakdown of the cities and scattering of the population, and now a reverse move of gentrification of the cities, which is driving out the poorer population there as rich people come in. These are all elements of urban life that just can't be overlooked, but many of the same problems exist. There will have to be a very serious redesign of urban life and the scattering of populations if the species is going to survive. We just can't go on this way. The capitalist one emphasizes the private gain and concentration of wealth and concentration of power, so it leads almost inevitably to a society of mansions, extremely elegant apartments right alongside of misery and poverty and so on, and also in a way which is massively wasteful of very scarce resources. So that's not, I don't think that's a viable system at all. If it's being exported to other parts of the world, they're in for trouble. What has to be done is a reshaping of priorities and goals so that we live in a sustainable, cooperative world with really functioning communities which participate in democratic processes, which do their own social planning, which take into account, first of all, objective constraints, like environmental constraints, but also just human conditions, like living together like human beings. I think a very new model has to be developed, including just from the point of view of architecture. I mean, you can't go on building buildings, homes, cities, and so on, without concern for the fact that you are imposing a huge burden on future generations, maybe a burden that can't be met because of the destructiveness of the techniques, the lack of concern for consequences, like, say, just simply energy use. That can't be done.
La noció de col·lapse és recurrent actualment en l'escenari mundial. Quina és la seva imatge de col·lapse?
Well, it's interesting to see what's been happening. First of all, collapses happened over and over again. I mean, the whole history of Europe is a history of savage destruction and massacre. Second World War, urban societies collapsed all over because they were destroyed. That's real major collapse. They've recovered over time, but the kind of collapse you're talking about, I think, is a different one. It's something that's not conscious destruction, but the kind of collapse that's inherent in human institutions, meaning that the institutions just have to change. So take, say, the financial crisis. The financial crisis, I mean, there's all kind of short-term reasons, you know, subprime mortgages and so on, but the basic source of it is just inefficiency of markets. I mean, markets are inefficient systems, and every economist learns it. They only provide certain choices, not others. So to be concrete, I have to go home tonight after work. Well, the market offers me a choice between going home in a Toyota or a Ford. It does not offer me the choice of going home by public transportation, because that's not a market decision. The market just doesn't have that option. That's a collective decision, which can be made in a society. It can be made autocratically, you know, by the Kremlin, or it could be made democratically. But in any event, it's a social decision, and it's out of markets. And there are a huge number of things like this. The market is very narrow in the choices that it provides. You can sell me a car, and you and I can make a bargain that's good for both of us. You know, you like the price, I like the price. But we're not taking into account the cost of our transaction to her. And there's a cost. There's more pollution, gas prices go up, there's more congestion, her life is harder, and so on. So it's a cost. And that cost is spread over a great number of people. And it's even spread over future generations because of the what we're doing to the atmosphere. But you and I don't take that into account when we make a transaction. Okay, that's an inefficiency of markets, built-in inefficiency, and not small.
Professor, vostè parla sovint de les bondats de l'anarquisme, sobretot dels moviments anarquistes del passat segle XX. En una democràcia com l'actual, amb moltes fissures i escletxes per on es perverteix el sistema, i amb una creixent crisi de confiança envers la classe política, quin pes creu que ha de tenir la societat civil en la democràcia actual?
Barcelona is the obvious place to talk about reviving anarchist ideas. It's the place where they were, Catalonia, Aragon, so on, the place where they were most fully realized in 1936 for a brief period, because there was a combined effort of Russia, the fascist countries, and the liberal West that joined together to crush this heresy, the heresy that you could actually have freedom, democracy, cooperation, and so on. That is so dangerous that all of the great powers, no matter what their political, you know, what kind of countries they were, they cooperated on that. That was the main task, destroy the Spanish Revolution. After they destroyed the Spanish Revolution, they sort of fought with each other to decide who's going to pick up the pieces. But so yes, and I think that those are exactly the kinds of ideas that the world needs. It's you have to adapt them to different circumstances, but basically the idea that authoritarian structures have no inherent legitimacy. They're not self-justifying. It's true if it's in a family, a patriarchal family. It's true if it's international society, superpower, anywhere in between. If there is a structure of authority and domination, it is not self-justifying. It has a burden of proof. It has to prove that it has a justification. That proof can almost never be given. And it can't be given, the structures ought to be dismantled. And that would lead to a free, voluntary, a society based on free, voluntary association, cooperation, mutual aid, and so on. And unless the world moves in that direction, I don't think the human species has much of a future. And this is just the right place to talk about it. On the second question, it's true that Obama mobilized a lot of young people. But what did he mobilize them to do? He mobilized them to push doorbells to advance what is actually called Brand Obama. Okay, that's not democratic, that's fascist. He mobilized a kind of a fascist movement in which a lot of young people are sitting there ready to take orders. Next time orders come about what Obama wants, okay, you go out and push the doorbells for Brand Obama. And that's the opposite of a democratic system. And there are democratic systems. In fact, rather strikingly, although this can't be perceived in the West, the poorest country in the continental hemisphere, namely Bolivia, continental because Haiti's poor, but on the continent, the poorest country is Bolivia. That's also the most democratic. I mean, they had an election 4 years ago in which the large majority of the population, which is indigenous, and happens to be the most repressed population in the hemisphere, reached a sufficient level of organization where they could enter the political arena, elect a candidate from their own ranks, not some rich guy who went to the great universities, but a poor peasant. And they developed the policies that he's supposed to follow. So, and they're serious issues, and everybody knew them. It's not here where issues are suppressed. Everyone knew them. Control over resources, issues of justice, of cultural rights, big issues in multi-ethnic societies, complex one, linguistic rights, and so on. These were the issues. They came out of public debate, discussion, and activism, and the elected representatives are supposed to represent them. Now, that's quite different from issuing instructions to an army of doorbell pushers who are supposed to advocate Brand Obama. It's the exact opposite. And yeah, it's much more close to democracy.
I mean, like other cultural practices, architecture has the power to dissent, to project an alternative view of the world from the mainstream view. But how do you balance popular demand against the opportunity for the architect, or more generally the individual, to put forward that alternative view?
Yeah, it's a very real question. I mean, if you ever build, people like me who aren't architects but have houses, face it all the time. You know, the architect wants to do something that's aesthetically pleasing and looks nice and so on, but happens to be unlivable.
Speak about. And as well, you know that you are very welcome in Barcelona anytime. I am sure you will meet a lot of friends there. There is a lot of friends. I know that you have a lot of friends. El Premi City to City Barcelona FAT Award obre el debat sobre la transformació de les ciutats des d'un àmbit pluridisciplinar. És a dir, busca aquelles respostes transformadores de la ciutat amb un clar benefici per la ciutadania. Professor Chomsky.
the kind of, in the advanced, particularly in countries like the United States, maybe the US is the most extreme example, the suburbanization of the last 50 years, which was very self-conscious state corporate policy, is completely unviable. I mean, it just can't survive. It's ecologically untenable, use of energy.
Creu que la manera com estan creixent les ciutats arreu del món afavoreix la qualitat de vida dels seus ciutadans?
Well, I suspect there's going to be a substantial change in that respect. For one thing, as I'm sure you know, the United Nations came out with a study a few years ago of slums. There's the inner city, which is a lively, vibrant city, and as soon as you move beyond the city, it's not actually a wall, but kind of like a fence. There's miles and miles of the most miserable, unimaginable slums that I've ever seen anywhere in the world. And they're getting larger and larger because people are coming in from the countryside, but they can't survive. They can't get into the city because the education, the talents, the opportunities aren't there, and so on. So they congregate in urban slums. Sometimes they're inside the city. You can go not too far from here and see pretty awful slums. Another problem is that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chomsky, for welcoming us here in your office at MIT. It's really a privilege for us to be here. For the European, and as well for the European people, for the young people, they will be very, very happy to know what you mean about all these subjects that we will